They told you to be kind, polite, agreeable. What they didn't tell you is that, if you're not careful, you'll spend your entire life auditioning for a role in a play you never chose. You'll chase applause instead of purpose, likes instead of meaning. Sounds harsh. Good, it's meant to be. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people are stuck in a psychological prison built from smiles, compliments, and fear of being disliked. But what if I told you that everything you're looking for, peace, confidence, directions, the moment you stop asking for permission to be yourself, you don't need to be liked. You don't need everyone's approval. And the people who taught you otherwise, they were prisoners to passing down their chains like inheritance. Today, we're going to shatter that cycle. You're going to understand why you care so much about what others think, how that's quietly killing your dreams, and most importantly, how to flip the script. The tools are here. The truth is raw. The reward, freedom. And by the end of this video, you won't just think differently, you'll feel differently. But don't skip ahead. What you're about to hear may sting at first. That's how healing begins. Since childhood, we've been quietly trained to chase after the smiles, nods, and pats on the back from others. A raised eyebrow from a parent, a teacher's frown, or even the silent treatment from a friend became signals of right or wrong. This need for approval wasn't just suggested, it was programmed. Little by little, external validation shaped how we walked, talked, and even how we dreamed. And guess what? Most of us never questioned it. As we grew older, that same instinct followed us like a shadow, just more subtle, more disguised. Now it's dressed up as the number of likes on a post, the title on a resume, or the silent pressure to follow a path we never chose. We sacrifice desires not because they're wrong, but because someone might disapprove. The psychological need to please others becomes a habit, and then a trap. That trap, my friend, is more common than you think. Imagine a kid who wanted to dance but switched to law school because dancing isn't a real career. It sounds absurd until you realize most people are doing exactly that, just in different forms. They shrink their dreams to fit someone else's expectations. They're living small, not because they lack ambition, but because they fear judgment. But here's where it gets interesting. What happens when emotions and choices start being shaped by someone else's standards? You can feel it every time someone posts a picture and checks the phone 5 minutes later to count the likes. The rush of dopamine that hits with every notification. That's not just excitement, it's dependence. External validation has become the new compass, deciding what's worth celebrating and what's worth hiding. When emotions are tied to approval, authenticity disappears. Suddenly, a person's smile isn't because they're genuinely happy, it's because their outfit got complimented. Decisions are made not based on inner values, but on potential applause. And when applause doesn't come, anxiety kicks in. That's the cruel irony. In chasing validation, people often lose the very thing they're seeking: peace. It's like building a house on someone else's land. Social media only makes it worse. Every scroll shows someone else's highlight reel, feeding the belief that success means cars, trips, and the perfect body. And when someone doesn't have those things, they feel small, unworthy. That's when the need for approval becomes dangerous. Because instead of living, they start performing. Let me ask you, have you ever posted something and deleted it because no one liked it fast enough? That tiny act reveals a deep truth: we've outsourced our self-worth. And when external validation becomes a necessity, we give strangers the power to dictate how we feel. The real question now is, what does this cost us over time? Think about how many times you've said yes when your whole being was screaming no. That inner tension, that tightness in the chest, comes from trying to be liked. The psychological need to please others isn't just exhausting, it's expensive. It costs energy, sleep, and, eventually, your own sense of self. And the worst part, it's so normalized, most people don't even notice it. Studies revealed that people spend a shocking portion of their lives obsessing over how they're perceived. In the UK, they calculated that about 8% of life is spent worrying about clothes, hair, and odor. That's years lost to insecurity. Imagine what could be built with that time if it were invested in purpose, not perfume. Emotions become hijacked by invisible expectations. People cancel dreams like they cancel appointments, quietly, and often with guilt. They skip starting that podcast, business, or trip, not because they lack resources, but because someone might laugh. That's how external validation holds people hostage, not with chains, but with what will they think. And ironically, most of those people they're afraid of aren't even paying attention. So here's a wake-up call. You don't need everyone to like you. You need one thing: freedom from this mental debt. Because when your happiness depends on how others react, you'll always be renting joy instead of owning it. But there's a path out of this. One that starts with something that scares most people more than failure. Most people spend years of their lives avoiding disapproval like it's fire. But what if I told you the very thing you fear being disliked is actually your doorway to freedom? It's not about being rude or rebellious for the sake of it. It's about dropping the mask. When you stop bending to every opinion, something magical happens. You start breathing deeper. Kashimi and Koga wrote about this radical concept in The Courage to be Disliked. And they didn't mean slight discomfort. They meant full-on rejection. Their point: the moment you stop needing applause is the moment you start living. Because the need for approval is just a cage made of smiles and nods. And true joy doesn't live in that cage. Think about it. Every innovator, artist, and visionary in history was disliked at some point. From Socrates to Steve Jobs, they all upset someone. Not because they were trying to, but because they refused to shrink. They prioritized their mission over the comfort of fitting in. That's not arrogance. That's emotional freedom. That's what happens when you stop chasing external validation. And here's the paradox. When you accept being disliked, you actually become more likable. Why? Because authenticity is magnetic. People may not always agree with you, but they'll respect your clarity. And respect lasts longer than approval. So the next time someone disagrees with you, don't flinch, smile. That's growth knocking. So, how do you develop that courage? That inner muscle that lets you walk your own path while others whisper behind your back? It starts with challenging your beliefs, especially the ones you picked up in childhood. And once you question those, well, you start to uncover something even deeper that's been shaping your actions all along. From our first day in school, we're taught to raise our hand, sit still, and color inside the lines. And while discipline has its value, there's a hidden cost most people overlook. That system rewards conformity, not creativity. It conditions us to chase gold stars and avoid red marks. Over time, the message becomes clear. External validation equals safety. You do well on a test, you get praise. You question the rules, and you're labeled disruptive. That feedback loop teaches a dangerous lesson. Approval is earned by obedience, not authenticity. And the more we follow that path, the more we suppress who we truly are. The result: adults walking through life with dreams still in the wrapper, afraid to open them. What's worse is how subtle this programming is. You might think you're making your own choices, but are they really yours? Or were they planted there by parents, teachers, or influences you never questioned? This is how the need for approval becomes embedded in your DNA. It hides behind good behavior, and that's exactly why it's so hard to spot. And here's the kicker. Society praises those who play by the rules, until it doesn't. Once you break free and succeed, everyone suddenly admires your courage. But during the climb, they'll call you reckless. That's the irony of conformity. It's only applauded when it produces results. So the real challenge: having the guts to step off the path before anyone claps for it. And if you've ever wondered why it feels so hard to say no or take an unconventional step, this is why. The pressure isn't always loud, but it's constant. And it's time we take a look at the ancient thinkers who faced that pressure too, and responded with something radically different. Cato the Stoic used to walk barefoot through the streets of Rome in deliberately mismatched clothing. Why? Not because he didn't own shoes, but because he wanted to train himself to stop fearing what others thought. It was a daily ritual, a form of armor building. His message: if you can laugh at yourself, the world can't hurt you. That's the first step toward defeating the fear of ridicule. Diogenes, the cynic, took it even further, living in a barrel, mocking the elite, and eating with his hands in public. Extreme, maybe, but it wasn't just shock value. He was demonstrating a truth most people run from. If you detach from external validation, you become untouchable. You stop reacting to whispers and start responding to purpose. Today, we don't need to live in a barrel, but we do need to build that same inner strength. Try going a day without fixing your hair, or wear something odd on purpose, and see how you feel. These little acts, silly as they seem, can rewire your brain. They tell your subconscious, I'm safe, even if they stare. That's where freedom begins. If that sounds childish, remember this: Confidence is a muscle, and discomfort is the gym. Most people avoid being laughed at their whole lives, but those who learn to walk through mockery, they move differently. They hold their heads higher, because the moment you stop fearing humiliation, you stop shrinking, and suddenly, your decisions become yours again. The Stoics weren't just wise, they were strategic. They knew that emotional freedom doesn't come from comfort. It comes from calculated exposure to discomfort. And as we'll see next, this idea ties perfectly into something even more relevant: the opinions you allow to shape your identity. You wouldn't eat food from a stranger's hand without knowing where it came from. So why do so many people swallow every opinion thrown their way? Filtering opinions isn't arrogance, it's survival. Not all feedback is wisdom. Some is just projection wrapped in confidence. And chasing external validation from the wrong people is like trying to quench your thirst with salt water. Take a moment to ask yourself, whose approval are you chasing? A boss who's burned out? A cousin who's never taken a risk? A friend stuck in the same place for 10 years? When your decisions are shaped by these voices, your future starts to look like their past. That's how the need for approval traps people in small, safe boxes labeled acceptable. Here's a practical tip. Next time you hesitate to do something bold, picture the person whose opinion you're fearing. Then ask, do I admire their life, their values? If the answer is no, why would their judgment carry weight? You'd be amazed how many dreams die under the pressure of opinions that didn't even matter. Most of the loudest critics have never built anything. They're experts in fear, not creation. And yet, they feel entitled to direct your steps. It's time to revoke their backstage pass to your mind. Not everyone deserves a seat at your table, especially if they've only ever brought criticism and insecurity as their contribution. And once you start filtering out these empty voices, you begin to notice something fascinating. Many of them weren't criticizing you, they were revealing something much deeper within themselves. Carl Jung didn't just study the mind, he decoded it. One of his most striking ideas is that what people criticize in others often reveals more about themselves. That snide remark, that passive-aggressive jab, that judgmental look, it's not always about you. It's a mirror, a reflection of a war they're fighting inside. That's the heart of projection. Have you ever noticed how insecure people are, quick to call others arrogant, or how someone who hides their ambition might mock yours? That's projection in action. They're not reacting to your truth, they're reacting to their discomfort. Understanding this changes everything. It separates you from the noise and reconnects you to your center. Instead of asking, why did they say that about me? You start wondering, what pain made them say that at all? And just like that, the power of their words begins to crumble. Because now, it's not about external validation, it's about internal clarity. You stop absorbing energy that was never meant for you in the first place. So the next time someone throws shade, pause. Don't get defensive, get curious. Ask yourself if their words sound more like a confession than a criticism. That mindset shift doesn't just protect your peace, it builds your strength. And over time, it gives you something even more valuable: detachment without bitterness. But here's the real kicker. The more you understand projection, the more you realize that the only opinion that truly shapes your life is your own. And that leads to a power most people only dream of. Real strength doesn't shout, it stands. It's the quiet calm that keeps you grounded when others panic. That's what self-confidence really is. Not arrogance, but an unshakable trust in your own judgment. When someone criticizes you and it no longer hits, that's the signal. Your sense of self is no longer outsourced to the crowd. Building inner strength isn't about pretending nothing affects you, it's about choosing what deserves your attention. It starts with the basics: what you read, what you eat, who you surround yourself with. You don't have to climb a mountain. Just start by waking up 30 minutes earlier to write, meditate, or walk. Every small win compounds. It's like training a muscle. Your body follows your mind. That's why activities like journaling, weightlifting, or cold showers work. They challenge your will. They rewire your brain to associate discomfort with growth. When you deliberately do hard things, the noise of other people's opinions starts to fade. You stop seeking external validation because you've already given yourself what matters most. Respect. People spend years chasing confidence in books, courses, and Instagram quotes. But the truth, confidence isn't found, it's earned. It comes from doing what scares you, then realizing you survived. And with each step, you become more solid, more rooted, like an oak tree unmoved by wind, unbothered by noise. And when That day comes when you no longer flinch at judgment. You'll finally be ready for the last and most powerful lesson of all. There will always be someone who disapproves of your choices. You could save a life and still be criticized for how you did it. That's the reality. So if disapproval is guaranteed either way, why not at least earn it by being true to yourself? The need for approval becomes irrelevant when you realize rejection is inevitable. When you stop fearing disapproval, you stop begging for permission to exist. That's when life opens up. Not because it suddenly gets easier, but because you stop asking, "Am I allowed to do this?" and start saying, "This is who I am." It's not comfort, it's freedom. And that's a trade worth making. People who live for applause are always exhausted, because applause fades. But integrity, that lasts. It doesn't shout, it echoes. Living authentically might mean fewer fans, but it also means deeper peace. You don't need the whole world to clap just to stop clapping for the wrong performance. You'll lose some people along the way. That's a fact. But you'll also attract those who admire your clarity, not your conformity. And that's how your circle gets smaller, but stronger. Because once external validation stops being your compass, your true direction becomes clear. And once you've tasted that kind of liberation, you'll never want to go back to the cage. Now let's rewind just a bit, because to understand how we fell into this trap in the first place, we need to revisit the very beginning of this story. So now that you know the truth, what are you going to do with it? Will you keep shrinking to fit inside someone else's comfort zone? Or will you finally take that terrifying, beautiful step toward living for yourself? Because here's the thing, this isn't just about breaking free from other people's opinions, it's about finally owning your life. Ask yourself, how much of your day is spent trying to be acceptable instead of authentic? How many dreams have you buried to avoid being judged? And most importantly, how much longer are you willing to live in a cage with the door wide open? That's not living, that's surviving on scraps of validation. So let me challenge you. Do one thing this week that you've been holding back just for you. Wear what you want, say what you believe, launch that idea, even if they roll their eyes, especially if they roll their eyes. Because that, right there, is the beginning of freedom. And hey, if this video hit you deep, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment. Tell me where you've been sacrificing yourself for approval. Let's talk about it. Let's grow together. And if you're ready to take this journey seriously, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notifications. There's a lot more coming that they don't want you to hear.